Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for a conversation about Resumes 101. I think today more than ever, resumes are super important. Today with social distancing because of the coronavirus, your resume is probably one of the only visual representations of you. So I think that today more than ever, it's super important to get your resume looking really nice and making it spotless and an excellent representation of you and the things that you offer to an organization. So my name is Cece Conover. As Tiffany mentioned, I have over 25 years experience in human resources. Most recently, I worked for the City of Fishers as the Human Resources Director. I did a fair amount of recruiting, all the way from reviewing resumes to doing interviews and making job offers. So I've decided to translate some of my years of experience in doing recruiting and trying to help people who our clients have Dress for Success and making them more successful in their job search. I've seen a lot of things go really well, and I've seen some things go not so well. So I'll share some of those with you today in hopes of, again, like I said, making you a better candidate through the job search process. All right. So some of the things that we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about what the purpose of a resume is. We're going to talk about how to beat the 8-second scan, and not to panic you too much, but that generally is the average amount of time that a recruiter will spend looking at your resume initially. So we'll talk about ways to make sure that you get past that 8-second scan and get a recruiter to look at your resume for longer than that. We'll talk about the content of your resume, and that's the meat and potatoes of your resume. And we'll spend quite a bit of time particularly focusing on the wording that you would use in your work history experience. We'll talk about format and style. I'll also talk to you a little bit about hard skills versus soft skills. I think it's a really good conversation to have because both are important. And so you need to understand the differences between the two types of skills and what employers are looking for when they're evaluating your skills and your abilities as you're applying for jobs. We'll talk about some of the common mistakes that we see in resumes, and Tiffany's seen a lot of resumes as well. So we can all talk about some things that we've seen that have really kind of thrown people out of the selection process because of some mistakes that have happened on the resume. And then I also want to spend some time finally talking about applications because a fair number of organizations today use online applications. And I'm going to talk about how that plays in the hiring decision making. So it plays a big role, and you need to understand how that functions on the backside. Okay, so what is the purpose of a resume? Obviously, it's to get the attention of the recruiter so that you can get yourself an interview. As I mentioned, there's basically a 6-second rule of thumb that people use to determine whether or not they want to spend any more time considering you in the process. We'll talk about that in just a couple more slides. It is your marketing piece. As I said, it's your only visual in most cases today, particularly with more people doing phone interviews. The only representation visually of you is your resume. So it is super important that it looks good, that it's clean, error-free, easy to read, and is a good representation of you. And it also should be industry and career specific. And I say that on two fronts. One is if you're applying for 2 different types of jobs, let's say that you're interested in hospitality, but you would also consider doing something in the medical field. If you have 2 super different interests, you need to make sure that you have 2 different resumes so that you're not trying to create one resume that will address both. When recruiters are looking at resumes, they're looking for people who are going to be a good fit. And the best fit to start with is to see who has done something similar to what they're trying to hire the person for. We always say the best predictor of future performance is past performance. So if we're looking at candidates who have either worked in our industry before, have done the same job before, we know then that they should be able to do it again. And sometimes it's not just the ability to do the job, it's also to know that the person has been in that environment, they like it, and they will stay with it. Not every industry is meant for everybody. And so sometimes people are concerned about hiring a person into a brand new industry, but they may not like it and they may not stay long. So it's your job to be able to explain to the recruiter why you would be a good fit for them both industry and career. And so you may find that you'll have multiple versions of your resume, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. All right. So first thing we want to talk about, resumes are subjective, and that is super important to understand. If you sent your resume to 5 different HR professionals and asked for their opinion, you will likely get 5 opinions. And that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It is what it is. It's like if you ask 5 people to read a book, you'll get 5 people to tell you what they think of the book, and they may be very different opinions. So there is not one perfect resume. The best resume is one that is clear, clean, makes a lot of sense, and does a good job telling your story. And beyond that, then style is just a matter of personal preference. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation today. Obviously, it's meant to be a professional representation of you. I'll talk about things to leave out of your resume, but this is what recruiters want to know. They want to know about your professional skills and abilities. So the resume should look professional. At Dress for Success, we always talk about looking your best, but also looking a little bit more conservative and a little more traditional. And I say that for a lot of jobs, that's probably true. However, if you're applying for jobs that are more in the creative industry, maybe more in marketing or public relations, maybe even in the art field, then your resume should be representative of those skills and abilities. And so your resume might look different for that purpose. First person is implied. That resume is only representing you, so it is not necessary to include pronouns like I and me and my. We know that the resume is talking about what you bring to the table in terms of skills and abilities. So that may mean a different way to frame your sentences or your bullet points, and we'll talk about that. As I said, you might have different versions, but you're also going to have multiple revisions. And what I mean by that is you're not going to be able to bang out a resume in 10 or 15 minutes. So just plan for spending a good amount of time working on your resume and getting it right. You only have one chance to make a good first impression, and that certainly is true as it relates to your resume in the 6-second scan. So make sure that you're going through it multiple times and having several people look at it for you and giving you feedback. I'll give you at the end of the presentation contact information, and you can have folks at Dress for Success review your resume for you if you'd like to get some feedback from other people. If you don't have anyone in your circle of friends or acquaintances that could do that review for you. And as we said, it needs to be a quick read, and we'll talk about how you make it a quick read. And a lot of it has to do with your style and your format, using bold and italics, things that will make certain words pop so that it stands out and makes it easy for that quick 6-second scan. All right, so how to beat the 6-second resume scan. Again, clean and easy to read. If your resume contains too much information, there's not enough white space, it's a jumbled mess, it doesn't go in order, it's confusing. The moment that a resume becomes confusing to me, I set it aside and it goes into my note pile. So don't make it easy to get tossed to the side. Make sure that it's easy for me to look at it quickly. If you happen to have a 2-page resume, your front page is going to have to be the one that's going to grab the attention. So make sure that it is attention worthy. And again, it relates back to how it looks. So if it has too much wording, it's too dense, it's too hard to get through, it's confusing, it's not laid out in a traditional format, is going to get passed over. A lot of folks think too that it needs to be matched geographically. What that means is a lot of times recruiters are looking to fill positions quickly. They want to get someone in the door within the next couple weeks. So if you have a street address, or not even a street address, a home address that's in another state, then they may have reservations about considering you for a position or even an interview, thinking that it may take you too long to get in and start at the job. So when we talk about the header, we recommend that you do not put an address on there for that purpose. If you are coming in from out of state, my advice would be to include something along the lines of your timelines and ways that you'd be able to start the job quickly in your cover letter. So if you are looking to move and you're applying for jobs out of state, I would certainly encourage you to address that in your cover letter. coming from a related job, function, or industry. And this is where you need to spend some time looking closely at what the job posting is, and making sure that you're matching the language and the wording in your resume to what is in the job posting. So that's why I say sometimes your resume is not a one size fits all. It will behoove you and it will benefit you if you do customize your resume to be able to call out some of the same words that they have in their job posting. And I'll refer back to that as we get farther into the presentation as well. The summary that's a perfect match. So a lot of candidates will put a summary on their resume, and a summary is different than an objective. An objective statement typically goes along the lines of, I'm seeking a position in this industry doing this type of job. To me, an objective is something that's a waste of space. We all know that you're sending out a resume because you're seeking a job. I think an objective statement is more appropriate on a cover letter, but a summary statement is something that you may want to consider putting on your resume, particularly if you have a lot of different jobs. So it'd be a nice way to kind of put all those jobs together in one nutshell and make sure that the summary sounds like something that would fit to that job opening that you're applying to. Highlight the skills to fit the job. Still saying kind of the same thing there, but that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the fit. And then content to back up the summary. You know the saying, talk is cheap. So you can say whatever you want in your summary, but you're going to have to be able to back it up with actual experience. So when you're saying in your summary that you've got X years of experience doing whatever, make sure when you're going through in your job experience in your work history that you're indicating that specific job task that alluded to in your summary. So if you're mentioning something in your summary, it's got to be then reinforced later in the details down at the bottom in your work history. Okay. So I thought what we would do too, just to kind of check in and make sure things are going smoothly, if you would go into your chat section and give us a quick thumbs up if you're understanding the kinds of information that we're covering so far, if the pace is good, or if you want me to go a little more quickly. We will allow for questions at the end. I didn't mention that. I'll probably go for another 20 minutes or so in the presentation. So you will have an opportunity for questions, but just give me a thumbs up if things are going well for you and this is kind of the material that you're looking for. Okay, so resume sections. So the contact section at the top should include your name, your email address, and I put in parentheses professional, and there's a reason why. I had about 10 or 15 years ago a candidate who applied for a job, and on the resume, their email address was luscious1@aol.com. Clearly not a professional email. Email addresses are free, so please choose something that's professional, something that includes your name or numbers or something. That's all fine, but be careful about including information about things that aren't professional, that are, have sexual innuendo or even things that refer to drinking and those kinds of things that are inappropriate. Include a phone number, and you may want to include your LinkedIn information, but I would not include address information. Summary, it must match the job that you're pursuing. So that's going to be one of the first things they're going to look at when they're reviewing your resume, see if they want to continue to move forward with you through the interview process. It should be 2 to 4 lines of information, and it's not an objective. It's a different type of a statement than an objective, as I said earlier. Your history is really the meat and the potatoes of the resume. And so we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about how you craft the wording in your work history to make sure that the words that are looked for are going to be appearing in there and will make sense and make your experience sound professional. If you have volunteer work, you may want to consider including that. Situations where you might want to include volunteer work would be where you don't have a lot of work history. You're a recent college graduate or a recent high school graduate, so you don't have a lot of work history, so you may want to add some of your volunteer work. You may also want to consider adding your volunteer work if you really like working in nonprofits. or you like the volunteer aspect of giving back to the community. So if you're applying to other nonprofit organizations, your volunteer work is going to be something that they're going to appreciate seeing. So consider whether or not that makes sense. Now, if you have a 2-page resume and putting your volunteer work is going to push you over to page 3, then I wouldn't do it. So it's very personal. It's very dependent on your situation, but it may be something worth including. So education, if you're a recent grad with no work history, you might want to consider adding some of your major projects that you did at work or at school, I'm sorry, and maybe even include some of your coursework. So if you had a capstone project, you might want to include that. But some of the coursework that you did that you're looking to apply in a new job, you might want to include, again, if you have very little to no work experience, that would be the time when you would do that. Once you start having more work experience, then that would fall off of your resume because it wouldn't be necessary anymore. Awards, honors, certificates, trainings, those are all good things to add in there. Be mindful though, throughout your resume, but it particularly comes up often in awards and honors and things like that. Don't use acronyms. I'm a member of SHRM, but I bet if I said that to you, most people on this phone call won't know what SHRM is. SHRM is Society for Human Resources Management. But if I only put SHRM on my resume, there might be some people who would look at my resume and not have a clue what that stands for. So don't use acronyms at any point during your resume without spelling it all the way out. Okay, so things to not include in your resume. I recommend not including a photo. And what you might find, particularly when you go out to some of the new resume templates out there, a lot of them are adding photos. I don't think that it's helpful. What you want your recruiters to be looking at are your skills and your abilities. And so your photo doesn't relate to any of that. So I recommend not including a photo. I also recommend not including references to religious affiliations. And there's a couple reasons why. One is if you show a lot of work that you do with your church, there may be some questions that come into a recruiter's mind. Are they so busy with their church work that they're not going to be able to commit fully to the job here? Are they so committed to their church work that they may try to get other employees here at my organizations to join their church? Maybe I had a bad experience with that particular church before, and so now I've got a negative connotation with that church. On the flip side, if your faith is super important to you and you hope to work for an organization that's also faith-based, then you may want to include it. But understand that there's pros and cons to adding your religious affiliations in any work that you've done with religiously affiliated organizations in the past, and understand what those are. Age, health, or family, no reason to put any of that on a resume. That's kind of old school, back in the 50s probably, when you saw people putting things on there about their age or good health or how many family members they had. So it's not necessary to put that on there now. As it relates to age, I often get questions about people putting the date that they graduated from college on there. I don't think that it's harmful to put that on there if you've graduated recently, but if you graduated in the 80s or the 90s, probably not necessary. Saying that you have your bachelor's degree or your master's degree, what the degree is and what organization it's from or what college or university it's from is sufficient. And the same is true on hobbies as it is for religious affiliations, in my personal opinion. Again, you're wanting recruiters to look at you for your skills and abilities and what you offer to the organization. If you say that you like to read books, here's some things I might think about if I see that. I might think that you're introverted, that maybe you're not going to be really good interacting with others, that maybe you're a nerd. There's all kinds of things I can think of when I see that someone likes to read books. None of them are work related. So I typically recommend that people don't include hobbies on their resume either. So. Okay, so contact section. This is at the top. This is probably not the best representation, but really this is all that it needs to be. It needs to be the name. Make sure it's pretty bold, pretty big, based on what else you're using in your resume. A phone number, whichever phone number you want to be called on, whether it's a cell phone or a home phone or an office phone, and an email address. Again, a professional email address. So street address doesn't need to be on there. It can be formatted in any number of ways, but really that's all that you should include on your contact section. And then the next section is a summary section. And Tiffany and I were talking about this earlier. She really did read pretty closely on the summary section and make a lot of decisions about moving forward with a candidate. I would as well, particularly to see if it was a good match for the position that I had open. What I have on this screen, which I think is a good example of a good summary that's okay, that's not bad, and a really terrific summary. And so I want to read through those so that you can hear how different they sound and why it's important to be spending time and thinking about what is in your resume. So saying that you're a data entry clerk with 5 years experience in the insurance data services, very fast typist, skilled in Microsoft Office, including Microsoft Excel and Access. I've worked in 2 different data entry jobs. One thing I'll also point out while I'm here on the data, on the summary section, you notice that there is nothing that says I was a data entry clerk or I am a very fast typist. All that's implied. We know that this is information about you. If you go over on the right-hand side and look at how this has been rewritten and how much more powerful of a statement this is, you'll start to understand what I'm talking about with making sure that you put a lot of good information in here. You also notice that they used a little bit of bold type, again, to draw the reader's eye to certain sections. So, highly accurate data entry clerk with 5 years experience seeking position with media level marketing. 10 key typing speed of 15,000 keystrokes per hour with 0 errors. Wow, that's a huge, powerful statement. Maintain 99% accuracy in 2 fast-paced data entry positions, entering 750 to 1,000 records per day. Again, wow, quantifying it. Increased efficiency for Franklin Lighting 33% by automating tasks with Microsoft Excel macros. So you can see there's a whole lot more details in there. There's a lot more that is quantifiable. Reading the one on the left just kind of leaves you standing, saying that you're a fast typist. I might think I'm a fast typist and type half that speed. So it's good to know that when you're putting in the quantity in there, that it is going to be much more impactful to the reader, and it's going to do a lot more for you in terms of moving forward and impressing the recruiters and getting you looked at a little more closely for an interview. Okay, work history. You should always include the name of the company, the city and state and location of it, your position title, and your dates of employment. This might seem pretty straightforward, but you would be surprised how many people don't do this. Work history is where you also spend time not just talking about the job duties, but the impact that you made using action words and transferable skills. And we're going to talk about what transferable skills are. There's 5 broad categories of transferable skills, and we're going to talk about those as well. But if you just list your job duties, I collected money at the cash register and served clients, not very exciting. But talking about the impact that you made, whether you served more clients, you increased the accuracy, you had a great record with the customers with a lot of repeat visitors. Think about the impact that you made in doing those job tasks is going to be much more impactful for the reader. So transferable skills, as I said, there's 5 broad categories. These 5 transferable skills apply in any job. So communication, initiative, teamwork, work ethic, and analytical ability. All of those are super nice to be able to say that you have. But again, talk is cheap, so you got to be able to prove it, right? So as it relates to communication, maybe you've contacted clients, maybe you've made proposals to management, maybe you've done presentations to staff. Those are all examples of communication. Take an initiative, you've created something, you've produced something, you initiated something. So showing that you've got initiative is also super nice to be able to demonstrate. Teamwork, you helped out others. So you assisted, you collaborated, you supported. Those are all nice to see as well, because quite frankly, most of us have to work in some sort of a team environment. And so being able to show that you have had that opportunity to work in a team environment and that you've done so successfully is a good thing to be able to show in your resume. Work ethic, dependable, proficient, and regular. So somebody that can be counted on. So you have an excellent attendance record. You've signed up for overtime regularly. You've had to back up in situations when someone's been out sick. All those kinds of things are nice to be able to know that you can be counted on if considered for a position moving forward. And analytical ability, you've analyzed, calculated, or evaluated. So all those can play into someone's analytical ability, and being able to show that you've got that is also a nice skill to show. Work history again. So I find sometimes candidates forget to include these on their resume, or they include them in a section that might get missed. So my advice is, if you've had a promotion, if you've had an interim job, if you've got an Employee of the Month or Perfect Attendance Award, any of those kinds of things, include them in the work history with the job that they're associated with. If you bury it down at the bottom into another category, it might not get caught because, again, that 6-second scan, right? And so if you get promoted, that's a really big deal. I can't say that enough. That means that your supervisors and your management team thought enough of you doing the job that you were assigned to do that you could even do more. So you probably took initiative. You had some sort of a leadership ability. People look to you for advice and assistance. So be sure to highlight in bold that you were promoted, or that you had an interim job for a period of time, maybe when someone was on a leave of absence, or when a position was vacant in between someone resigning and another person being hired. Employee of the Month and Perfect Attendance Awards, those kinds of things, even if it's called something different, use the jargon that everybody's going to recognize. So if the company that you work for has some special award that only that company uses that title, translate it into something that makes more sense. But make sure to point that out early on in the resume so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Okay. So as you can tell, we're spending a lot of time talking about work history because, as I've said again and again, this is the heart of your resume. And so this is where you can really trip and fall, as if you don't do a good job in articulating what your skills are. Here's another example of an okay one on the left and a really great one on the right. So talk with customers to find out what they wanted done, versus interacted frequently with customers to determine their needs to create customer-focused landscape design projects. Wow, that's much more specific, and it really articulates and describes well what someone did. In charge of a team of 5 workers. Well, that's really pretty good, but how about trained and supervised a crew of 5 workers, leading by example and ensuring compliance with company policies? Even better, right? Finish the job on time and satisfy customers? Good. But how about saying earned exceptional reviews from customers for quality of work and timeliness? And again, I'm going to point out, talk is cheap. Don't put stuff on your resume or your application or anywhere, for that matter, that's not true. So if you've never gotten exceptional reviews from customers, don't say that. It obviously sounds terrific, but when I go and do a background check and I've talked to previous supervisors or previous customers or previous coworkers, and they indicate that you've never had exceptional customer reviews, that's it. You're out of the process, and you're not going to be considered further for that job or for any other job because you have falsified your application and your resume. So remember, as tempting as it might be to overinflate what you've done and to make you sound like an even more of a rock star employee than you are, be careful about that because you're going to have to prove it at some point or another. So do a good job of telling your story and bragging about yourself, but don't lie and don't deceive. Okay, writing responsibility and accomplishment statements. This can be hard. And so there's 2 slides, this one and the next one, that can help you with thinking through what all to include in your responsibility and accomplishment statements. So you start with questions: what, who, how, and why. Seems pretty basic. So what was training, and who did you train? Well, I trained new wait staff. Well, how did you do it? Through mock demonstrations. Well, why did you do it? So we had improved customer satisfaction. So now, rather than just saying I've trained staff, you can have a much more comprehensive statement that goes into who was trained, how you did it, and what the purpose was. So thinking through and using those 4 questions as you're writing out your responsibility and accomplishment statements, that will help you to come out with better statements that are more descriptive of what you did. Here's another way to look at it. So you have your action verb, like trained, and then job duty, what you did, skill, how you did it, and result, why you did it. So both of those slides are doing the same thing, but you may find one way of getting through and writing your accomplishment statement easier to use than the other. So just trying to think through the entire picture as you're writing out your work history is going to be more helpful to you, I think. Okay, education. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but I want to touch on it a little bit more specifically. So again, school name, degree, and date. I say date if it's been fairly recently. If it was back in the 80s or 90s, no need to include it. If you haven't completed it, go ahead and put on there anticipated completion date. So perhaps it's Indiana University degree in marketing, anticipated graduation date, May of 2021. So it's fine to put an anticipated date, but be clear about it. So don't say that you have a degree if you don't. So make sure that you're clear that it's not quite done yet by saying you have an anticipated completion date. Grade point average, that's fine to put on there. If it's something below 3.5, I probably wouldn't put it on there. And if it's more than 2 years ago, I also wouldn't put it on there. It's not relevant anymore. Your work history is more relevant to me after you've worked in the field for a couple of years than what your GPA was when you were in college. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have very little to no work experience, then the best thing to do is to include capstone projects, major projects at work, major coursework, just to give it a flavor for some of the things that you did. And so whether that included doing some real life experiences with working with an organization and doing some reviews and some reports and some recommendations, any of those kinds of things are going to be helpful to help substantiate or to put a little bit more in terms of work type experience on your resume. Okay. Honors, awards, certificates, and training. Make sure that they're, particularly if you're talking about professional associations, that they're active or very recent past. Again, no acronyms. If you had any officer assignments, so you were the president, you were the secretary, any of those kinds of roles that you might have had with a professional association is nice to see as well. If you have any school or professional honors, so if you were on the dean's list, if you had any honors as a professional, you're recognized by your colleagues in the industry. Those are always super nice to see. Again, dean's list back in the 80s or 90s, we don't care about, but something that was recent would be helpful to have on there. Active or recent certificates. So for me in SHRM, Society for Human Resources Professionals or Management, we have a couple different certificates. They last for 3 years. So I would probably include those on there, particularly if it was current. So if you've got any of those sort of professional certificates, include that too. And training, I put on there including online training. Now more than ever, a lot of us have some free time. So why not use this free time to improve our professional skills and abilities? There are a lot of training programs out there online, some of them free or super low cost. So consider taking some of those training classes that are out there to use during this time that you've got available and include that information on your resume. That demonstrates your interest in learning and developing and staying current and fresh with what's going on in your industry that you're applying for. So I wholeheartedly encourage you to include that on your resume too. References. So several points about a reference. One is, it is a separate sheet of paper. Don't attach it to your resume. Don't give it out unless it's requested. Don't even put it at the bottom of your resume. Reference is available upon request. that's a throwaway statement. We know that they're available upon request, and it's just going to take up space on your resume that's not necessary. So don't include it with your resume, or don't include it with your resume, but just have it available for when it's requested. On that separate sheet of paper, when you're listing your references, list their name, their title, the employer that you knew them from, and then the contact information, if they prefer to be contacted by email or phone or both. And I recommend that you have 3 to 5 professional references. If you don't have professional references, consider using someone who you worked with in a volunteer capacity, or maybe someone through your school. I never called pastors. I never called relatives. Worst case scenario, you could list coworkers, but who I really want to talk to when I'm doing background checks were previous supervisors. They're the ones that could tell me that you followed instructions, that you did a quality work, that you were reliable, and the kinds of things that are important to me as I'm making hiring decisions, supervisors can tell me. So do your best to get at least 3 to 5 professional references. And then, like I said, keep their information on a separate sheet of paper. I also remind people to please tell your references when you're giving their names out. Some of the worst references I ever had were people who didn't know they were references. They weren't anticipating my phone call. So as you might imagine, they were a little grumpy and probably not saying as nice of things about you as they probably could if they knew in advance that you were using their name as a reference. So give them a courtesy, let them know that you would like to use them as a reference and get their permission. And then once you've gone through your job hunt and you've landed your dream job, give them a call back, thank them for all that they did to help you along the way, and let them know that they won't be getting any more reference calls for you. And so just kind of close that loop and let them know that. Okay, format and style. My opinion on format and style is this. One is that as long as it is a clean, easy to read document, I'm going to be far more focused on the content than the style. Unless I am looking for a candidate who might work in my public relations department or marketing department. And then in that case, if I get 2 resumes from different candidates, they have similar backgrounds in terms of experience, but one has a very fresh and current resume and one is probably a little old and stale, I might preference that one. But that's the only scenario where I'm really going to give a lot of preference to a flashy, fresh looking resume style. I'm much more concerned about what content is in there. Make sure that the font is consistent in size, and we'll talk about that in a second, and the style is consistent. A good amount of white space. It makes it easier to get through. It doesn't feel so daunting, and it helps with that 6-second scan that the recruiters are going to do. And then just tiny bit of bold and italics, and that will help to draw the reader's eye into certain areas. If you overuse it, then it's lost its purpose. So be careful about using bold and italics too much. Here's an example of a traditional resume. And as I said, it's not got the super fancy bells and whistles and lots of color and drama. But man, this is so easy to read. It draws my attention to certain points. It flows nicely. It's got a good amount of white space to it. I know exactly where I can find the information I'm looking for. And so if I got a resume like that, this would be super easy for me to read and make a quick decision if I'm interested and they're going to meet my minimum criteria for the job I have open. And I'd be very pleased to see a resume like this. There's no typos in it. It's just a nice, clean, traditional resume that gets the job done. So some things to think about as you're setting up your resume: an inch to half-inch margin all the way around. Your font size should be between 10 and 12. Much smaller, it makes it too daggone tiny to read, and it's just going to make it feel, again, more dense. Never clutter your resume, so don't feel compelled to necessarily put every single task and responsibility or every single job that you've ever had. You want to keep your resume down to 2 pages maximum. If your resume is a page and a little bit, try and get that little bit over to 1 page, because having a full page and this tiny bit on page 2 just kind of looks silly. But if you've got enough work experience that 2 pages is what it takes, 2 pages is what it takes. So I know that there are some folks out there who say no more than 1 page, and I'm not of that opinion. If you have substantial work history information that needs to be communicated, get it onto 2 pages so that there is a nice amount of white space and it looks easy to read, rather than to cram it all onto one just to meet this 1-page rule that some people have. Spell check and proofread at least 3 times. As I said, you're not going to bang out a resume in 10 or 15 minutes, and part of it is the review process. There are some recruiters I know who will immediately throw out a resume if there's a typo. So, and I personally think that's a darn shame on all kinds of fronts, but just make sure that your resume is spotless. You have plenty of time to look at it, to review it, to feel good about it, and you get the information in there that you need. So take the time to do that. And as I said today, with a lot of phone interviews happening, it is the only visual representation of you. So make sure it's a good one. Never use the personal pronouns. We talked about that. Start responsibility and accomplishment statements with action verbs, and use correct verb tense. And what I mean by that is when you're talking about a job that you're currently in, you're using present tense verbs. When you're referring to jobs that you perform but no longer perform, use past tense verbs. So scan through and make sure you're staying consistent on that. Sometimes if as a recruiter, you read through and somebody's using present tense, but it's on a job that they had before, then it seems confusing if they're still doing that job. So again, just to keep the confusion down, make sure past tense verbs for previous jobs that you no longer do, present tense verbs for current positions. I also recommend that you save and print your resume as a PDF. Saving it and sending it as a PDF document rather than a Word document. I can't tell you how many times I would get resumes in a Word document and open it up and it's a hot mess. And so whatever you sent and how it looked on your screen might have looked fantastic, but by the time it gets over to me for whatever reason, it doesn't look good at all. And I get too frustrated and I move on. So saving it as a PDF is going to preserve the format and the look that you're wanting your recruiters to see. There's some free format template websites out there. The one that we recommend at Dress for Success, or we know about, is canva.com. When you go to canva.com, they have a templates tab, and then through there you can go through professional resume templates, and then it's kind of a plug and play. And there's a ton of different ones to choose from, as you can tell: modern, simple, infographic, all that. Some of them get a little crazy. Like I said, they'll have photographs of people in there and look pretty modern. And I always say, be careful about that. Depending on the type of job that you're applying for, sometimes too much is too much. So, but if you're interested in doing something a little bit different, you might want to check out this website. Another free resource that Tiffany mentioned early on is NextJobs. They have a ton of information on their website, including resume resources. So if you'd like to get more information and consider using their resume template, go to nextjobtraining.com and create a free account, and then that access code that's listed there is the access code that you would use to get to all the free materials there. So super nice website. I can't even get through all the information because there's so much there, which is wonderful. Okay, quick thing on some grammar errors that we see a lot. Words that sound the same but have different meanings are called homophones. So 222, one is a number, one is more than one, and one is from here to there. So be careful when you're using words like that to pick the right one. Possessive versus contractions, confusing words of possession and contractions of 2 words. So your and your. So the second one is a contraction for you are. If you're in doubt, just don't use a contraction. Poor use of apostrophes. So using them when they're not necessary. I led a team of 10 employees. That's not a possessive. 10 employees is plural, so you would not have that apostrophe there. Subject and verb agreement, make sure that they match. So if the subject is singular, the verb is singular. And just be careful about that. And we already talked about verb tenses. Okay, hard skills and soft skills. I'm watching the clock and I can't believe I've talked this long. Tiffany, you're probably getting a good laugh at this right now. So hard skills versus soft skills. On the left would be your hard skills, on the right is your soft skills. Both of them are important, but understanding what the differences is. So hard skills are important, particularly when they're in the minimum criteria. Soft skills are nice to have and do play a big role. So if you've got some of these soft skills, think about ways to incorporate them in your resume. I did list quick learner with an exclamation point in parentheses, and here's why. For me, it's a pet peeve to have an exclamation or to have quick learner listed as a resume. I feel like that's a giveaway. And it's subjective, right? I might think that I'm a quick learner, but maybe if I talk to some of my teachers, they would disagree. So typically if I hear someone say that they're a quick learner, that means that they've never done the job that I'm trying to interview them for, and it sounds like they're desperate. So be careful about saying that you're a quick learner. And with any of these skills, hard or soft, again, remember, you got to back it up. So you can't say that you have experience with pivot tables and you can't even tell me what a pivot table is. So again, make sure you can back up any of these skills by giving examples of work that you've done to demonstrate them. Other errors to avoid. Typos, not including keywords to match the job posting. I've covered a lot of these already, so I'm not going to go into too much in the interest of time. Remember though, if you do use some generic content, it makes it sound as though any old job will do. And as I often talk about when I'm at Dress for Success doing first impressions, sometimes we're in a place where we're looking for a job. Sometimes we're in a place where we're looking for the job. And when we're looking for the job, our dream job, we do want to be more specific in our content and making sure that we're being purposeful in the way that we're approaching and seeking a job. So just be careful about what the message is that your resume is saying about you based on what you're including in your resume. So all these things we've already talked about, so I'm not going to spend more time there. These are words and phrases to avoid. They've just been overused and they're old, and again, sometimes they're even hard to substantiate. So try to avoid using these words and phrases on your resume. Online applications. I do want to spend a quick moment here because this is super important. So many organizations are using online tracking systems. And what I mean by that is you're applying for a job online with their system. Their system then has a software program, it's called an applicant tracking system, that is using an algorithm to screen the applications. There are organizations who receive hundreds of applications, and it is not feasible for recruiters to read each one. So they use these ATS systems to screen the applicants and score them, and then only move forward the ones who are meeting some minimum criteria for the recruiter to see. So I tell you that so that you do not put in your online application in job duties, see attached, hoping that the recruiter will open up your beautiful resume that you worked for hours on. Be sure to include all the information. Don't leave any required sections blank. Use the keywords in the job posting in your job application. Another really wonderful web resource I want to make sure to recommend to you is jobscan.co. That's not a typo, it's .co, not .com. So jobscan.co, what you would do is you would load your resume and you would load the job posting, and it would do a similar algorithm that the ATS systems do. And it will tell you how close of a match your resume is to the job posting and then make recommendations to you. They are trying to get to an 80% match, and they believe that a lot of recruiters are using similar algorithms before they're moving forward with applicants. So just know that that's a good way to check that out. Okay, so wrapping up. We are doing another workshop similar to this one, a different topic though, how to ace a virtual interview. If you've enjoyed this and you're looking to get some more help and assistance on interviews particularly, consider joining us next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. That information on there tells you how to RSVP, and you can certainly go through Dress for Success's website to get those links too. As I mentioned, if you'd like to have someone else look through your resume, use the resources at Dress for Success, and you can contact Tiffany. There's her email address. Send over your resume, and she can have folks to look at your resume and give you some feedback on things that look good and some things that you may want to change. So, sorry, I only left a few minutes for questions, but go ahead and open up the floor if you'd like with any questions or comments that you have for me today, please.
Yeah, let me take everybody off mute so they can ask questions if they want. All right. If you want to type questions,
May I ask a question?
yeah, go right ahead.
I'm 53, and so I wouldn't put a date on my education, but I also have lots of job history. Would you recommend that I only put jobs that are applicable to the job I'm applying for? Or will that look like gaps?
Yeah, that's what I don't like either. I don't like for there to be gaps. So maybe what you do is you still list all of your jobs so that shows that there's not been a gap. You spend more time on the jobs that are relevant and connected and putting more information there. And so, you know, maybe if you did, I'm just throwing something out there, if you did a waitressing job for a couple of years while you were in another community for a while, you might include that, the name of the organization and what you did and the dates, and then move on and go back to the other ones that had more job related things for what you're applying for. But
Right.
yeah, I like gaps.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
What other questions do you guys have?
There's
Hello.
a question, Cece, and it says, how should gaps in employment be represented on your resume?
How should gaps on a resume?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, gaps on, there's a couple ways to do it. My best advice is to address it on a cover letter, because there could be a lot of reasons for why that gap existed. For me, I lived out of country for a couple years, so I would put that in the cover letter. I wouldn't put on the resume itself that I lived overseas. And so I think probably the best thing is to have the gap on the resume, but then go into more detail on the cover letter. Other questions?
Yes, I do. I have a question. I'd like to know, once again, about the reference list. You were kind of going in and out. Did you say, is it okay, you said to put their name, you do want their address or their email address?
Right, so however the reference wants to be contacted. Typically, I like to talk to a reference by phone. But if a reference says, you know, if you're going to give my name out, will you just give out my email address? Absolutely. Then I'll send an email and contact the reference and say, I'd like to talk to you about this candidate that has listed you as a reference. Can you please let me know if you want to answer these by email, or if you could give me a call back at your convenience. So yeah, I would say their name, the company that they work for. I like to know how they know you. So were they your supervisor or not? And then either a phone number or email or both.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have a question, Cece. How should online diplomas or certificates be listed? You mentioned the online learning, and I know that there are different learning platforms now where, like the free universities, where people can actually go and do the training online, but it's not a well-known certificate. How would you list that?
So if it's not a well-known certificate, I think it's then up to you to do the job of explaining it. So let's say you you took a training class in something that's computer-based. So maybe what you do then is say what the certificate is, but then underneath it you explain what the class, what the training was about in more detail. Is that what you're kind of going towards? Something along those lines?
Yes, such as like the Allison University or the Allison.com, where
Mhm.
you can basically get a diploma or certificate online for maybe project management or something like that, but
Mhm.
it's not the normal project manager well-known certification.
Right. So I think as long as you're clear about, not trying to be deceptive, but you're clear about where you're getting it from, and then if it seems like something that may not be um, easily understood, just taking another line to go into a little bit more detail about it. But absolutely,
So you get a bullet
obviously,
points under.
bullet points underneath.
Uh-huh.
I think that there's certainly a preference, or I don't know how to say it, a degree from, let's say Notre Dame is going to look a little bit different than, an online degree from, Allison University, perhaps. But I still think there's a lot to be said for people who go and take the time and do what they can to improve themselves, to increase in their skills and abilities, and keep fresh with whatever it is that they're looking to do. So I would not be bashful about including it. I would absolutely encourage you to do that.
Thank you. So would it be the same way basically with an internship that you weren't paid to do? And that's something that is that in employment? Could you do that?
Okay, you broke up a little bit, but I think I understood you. So you're asking about whether or not to include an unpaid internship?
Yes, basically that's correct.
Yeah, absolutely include unpaid internships. Internships are really, really good work experience. And if you did the internship in an organization that's a similar industry, that's even better. It's amazing how much things like knowing the lingo of an industry makes a difference. Things like that really do make a difference. So we don't care whether or not you're paid. You could be a volunteer, you could be an intern. Having that experience is what matters.
Okay. And if it's in a different industry, is it just my responsibility, obviously, to relate the learning that I had in one industry and the transferable skills to the industry that I'm trying to apply for?
You got it. Absolutely. Yep. And so
Thank you.
maybe that happens up in the summary section, where you do that
Mhm.
that correlation between what you've done before and what you're looking to do going forward.
Perfect. Thank
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Cece, we had another chat question. It says, hello, Cece. Some recruiters ask for resumes in Microsoft Word format. In this case, what do you suggest I do? Send it both in PDF and Word format?
That's a good question. I've not seen that asked in that way. If they're asking it for in Word, then just send it in Word. There's no harm in sending it as a PDF if that make you feel better. I'm not sure why they're doing that. Hard to know.
Perfect.
Uh,
Does anybody have any other questions for Cece?
I do. On references, does it matter how old the reference is? Like, I'm 53 and some of my best experience has been right out of college. So it would be a rather dated, but it would give depth to my referral, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about the age of a reference if it was from some time ago. If you had a really positive work experience, maybe it's somebody that even was like a mentor to you, and then
Right.
maybe
That's
was
what I meant.
do.
Yeah.
I think that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Are you guys going to send us all of the outline today of what you covered?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And will we be told how to access the recording of this session as well as last week's if we participated?
Yeah, if you go to our website under the Career Resource Center, it's on there as well. I can have Liz include that in the email if you want it as well. Today's recording probably won't be on there till tomorrow. It takes a lot to kind of compress them down and then put it on the website, but last week's recording is on there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was wonderfully helpful.
Thank you.
How many days does it last?
Thank you.
Right now it's on there forever. I think she's going to move it to a YouTube channel, but you'll still be able to access that from our website. And then once we get more, we'll be able to remove them. But right now we don't have a date on taking them off.
Okay.
And one more, will there be a separate session on best ways to communicate some of these things that you've told us about today once we actually get in an interview, whether it's virtual? I know we talked about phone last week, or any other kind of interview. That seems to be an area that I've gotten a little stumped on before. I can write a really great resume, but making sure that I've practiced, like you said, examples of some of the skills that I have, that's where I need more help too.
Yeah. Next week we'll do virtual interviews, which will kind of be like a real interview. It just would be more or less on a Zoom or a Skype call. So I think that'll cover some of that. But we're definitely open to any topics that you have that maybe you want to see a virtual workshop on. When things get back to normal and we get back into the office, I'm not opposed to still doing virtual workshops, or at least doing something virtual to where we can record it and put it out there. So I'm definitely open to topics that you or anybody's interested in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would concur with her that knowing what your common questions and how to tie it back to your resume to back up your skills would be a good topic.
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions for Cece?
So Cece, again, I'm 53 and I still, no matter what, have to leave my resume at 2 pages maximum.
I really do recommend that you do. You know, it's funny, I had a resume that was 4 pages one time, and I could not get over it. I just thought, who thinks they have enough information that I care about that they want to spend my time looking at 4 pages? And so you might even get a similar reaction to a 3-page resume. So it's hard, I know, when you've got a deep bench, and you've got a lot of experience, to do a good job of summarizing
Just pick
it.
the most relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what you can do is, when we talked about tailoring your resume for what you're looking for. So if there's only one career path that you're intending to take, then you probably won't have a lot of different resumes. But thinking about what skills are most important in what you're pursuing, and then drilling in on that on each of your previous work experiences.
Okay.
Okay.
And the one thing I don't like the idea of a topical resume instead of a chronological. It seems traditionally just chronological is preferred. Would you agree?
I do. Tiffany and I've talked about this before too. They call them functional resumes, and I find them frustrating because what I often want to do is to see how many years of experience you've had doing, let's say, customer service. And so in your functional resume, you're not typically using that format to tell me how many years of experience you've had. In a chronological resume, I can see that much more clearly. And so I get the purpose of a functional resume, and for some people, it might be the best strategy for them. But most recruiters I've talked to really prefer the traditional chronological ones.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. Is there any other questions? All right, well, we'll get this emailed out to you. I'll also include in there where to find the recordings from last week and where to find this recording. This recording probably won't be on there till tomorrow, but it will be on there. It'll be under the same link that we send for last week's recording. And then hopefully we'll see you guys next week for the virtual workshops topic on how to do a virtual interview.
And then to clarify, I'm Monica Dorner and I had to call in, so I would still like an email, and I might not be on the record the same way.
Nope, you're good. We got you.
Okay.
Thanks, Monica.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Thank
Thank
everybody.
you, Tiffany. Thank you, Cece.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
So-